the Southwest Light Rail Line, which is on the chopping block if you've been following the stories here. And we thought it'd be a good idea to explore this a little bit more. Jim Voss is with us. Jim, good evening.
Good evening, Moose. How are you?
I am fantastic, brother. It's Friday night. Couldn't be better.
And we're talking about Saturday Night Fever on Friday night and the show's on Sunday night? I'm confused.
I know. You got to keep track here, man. There's a lot of moving targets. Jim, you're with Cresa, Minneapolis, right?
I am, yes.
And what is it that you guys do again?
At Cresa, we have spent the last almost 30 years helping companies find space. We spend all our time helping big companies and small companies find the facilities that they need, whether it's office or retail or industrial. All of my clients, are in the business of employing people and, being producers in the economy.
Sure.
My clients aren't landlords. They're users, so they're employers, probably like a lot of your listeners.
Well, I ask that because in your 30 years, I would imagine you probably help people find locations along the Hiawatha Highway 55 corridor back when that light rail thing was coming in. And I've enjoyed some great craft brews up and down that stretch. And my daughter actually lived in an apartment right off of there for a while.
There might be a distillery or two along there that's pretty fun, too. Yeah.
So, I would imagine that thing had a pretty positive impact. I know I hear people from time to time griping about the ridership numbers and stuff like that, but I don't know about you, but I've traveled that quite a bit. I enjoy it.
I think that most people expected that Hiawatha corridor to bring life to that corridor much more quickly than it did. It's certainly come along. The housing development has come along. You mentioned the distilleries, the craft brew places. I think that has been a gradual shift in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the Green Line going over to St. Paul, and you're seeing people move in behind that much more quickly. When you look at the housing development that's happening in the Midway, when you look at some of the retail that's coming back along there, certainly the construction was disrupted.
Well, and the soccer stadium that's going to be coming in over there, I think is going to be a big shot in the arm as well.
I've got a client looking for space along that Midway corridor right now, and every time we think we found a building, somebody else has snapped it up from under us. It's sort of like the residential market right now along the Green Line. As fast as you see something you like, somebody else is after it.
Why do you think the Green Line caught on faster than the Blue Line Hiawatha corridor area?
I think we were a little more familiar with it when it came along. And I also think that being between the two downtowns, there was already a more established residential base and a more established commercial base. And that blend is what I think makes some of these corridors really effective. And candidly, that's why I think the Southwest line is one that I would be really sad to see go.
So for our WCCO listeners that might not be familiar with exactly where the Southwest Light Rail Line would be going, because it has been, kind of changed and pulled back a little bit in some areas. What right now is what they want to do? What's the plan?
Well, the design for it right now, essentially, if we'll start downtown on what is the east end of the new part, the Green Line that comes from St. Paul ends at the new Twins Stadium at Target Field there. That line would continue west through the Bryn Mawr neighborhood of Minneapolis, down through St. Louis Park, along a railroad corridor that's a bike trail today, familiar to maybe some of your listeners, out through Hopkins, and then it turns south into Minnetonka through what we often call the Opus Park, and then we'll terminate actually down in Eden Prairie. So it connects, and what I think is unique about this line, it connects employers kind of along the line. There are not just people at one end and just at the other. The Hiawatha line, there are residences along the middle, but there isn't as much commercial activity. This Green Line extension, the Southwest line, has the downtown employers. It has employers in Bryn Mawr. There are employers in St. Louis Park and Hopkins and Minnetonka all the way along. And so this one I think is unique because it moves employees to employers both directions and throughout the line. It's not an end-to-end run. It's full of employment and full of residential all along the way.
And I would imagine, if you know the history of St. Louis Park, since the 50s, it has really just kind of grown into its own and really welcomed all different, cultures and peoples there. I would imagine that They probably threw their arms open, one of the first communities when they heard that this was proposed.
Yeah, there's been a little dissension about how the rail gets into and through St. Louis Park, if you decide you want to go back and read some of that. But gosh, when you look at what a community St. Louis Park has become and the identity that the park enjoys, you're right. It's a mix of all levels of economic strata. It's all kinds of employers. There are manufacturers along that line, right along Highway 7, that are thrilled that this would give them access to a workforce that might not be able to get there. There are folks who live in the Meadowbrook community just west of the Methodist Hospital who are looking at that line, 3-4 blocks away, saying this gives our residents access to employers from Eden Prairie to downtown. So this is one of those lines that helps employers and employees, again, in both directions, kind of all day. And that's why I think this line is probably one of the most important contributions to our transit system that we've got out in front of us.
Well, and again, it affords people that might not have, the ability to, really have a decent car transportation back and forth into a job in downtown or along that stretch to be able to make a go of it. And,
exactly. Yeah, for a lot of people, not having a car might be a choice, might not be a choice, but transit in general, whether it's buses or trains, gives everybody better access to employment opportunities. When Amazon was trying to get people to work at the fulfillment center in Shakopee last winter around the holidays, they ran buses to get people out to Shakopee. Well, here's proof that sometimes you need transit to get employees to your place of work. For Cresa, our clients, especially the ones that we've got downtown right now, are saying public transit and access to transit is one of the most important things we're going to consider when we talk about location. How easy is it for how many people to get to my place of work? With the war for talent that we've got going, access is critical. Lightrail and transit in general becomes a really important factor.
Well, from an economic standpoint, I mean, the people that get paid those jobs that are working, along that stretch that may use the transportation, or the jobs, more importantly, that get created, that money gets spent back in our economy here, where a little bit farther up the
economic consequence, lots of people have done lots of studies, and I think the metrics are pretty intriguing. And again, I think the slow adoption on the Hiawatha line, the gradual adoption on the Green Line, you're going to see an acceleration on this Southwest line. But I think there's another metric that I think comes up. There's often this kind of metro outstate divide. I grew up in Duluth. My wife's from Grand Marais up the North Shore. I know that outstate, some people look at the metro area and go, why are all the transit dollars getting spent there? And the truth is, when we reduce congestion in the middle of the state, all of the trucks that are hauling product from Chicago to Fargo or from Rochester to Duluth are fighting that congestion. If we can reduce that congestion, those products move through the state faster, and it saves everybody money. There was a poultry producers group that did a study, and they were starting to measure the impact on the cost of a pound of chicken every time traffic gets worse in the metro area. I don't have the numbers for you, but it reminds me that everybody in the state does better when roads and bridges and trains and buses all work. And when the state says we're going to unfund transit, we're going to cut funding to the Met Council for buses, we're going to cut funding for roads and bridges, that legislative position, I think, frankly, costs everybody in Minnesota money, and that's unfortunate. I can get passionate about light rail, but I can back up and see the bigger issue and go, wait a minute, state of Minnesota, why aren't we funding transit? This matters for every employer. It matters for every resident. We got to talk about this.
Well, otherwise you're looking at adding more, lanes for traffic and cars and things like that. And
I was reading an article the other day that was strongly opposed to the train, the light rail, and they said, well, if we just had more people riding buses, that would be great. Well, it's the same transit budget, folks, and if we don't build train lines, we do have to make room for either cars or buses on the freeways or put up with more congestion. We're spending one way or another. Unless we reduce employment and reduce population, then maybe we could reduce roads, but I don't see that as the desirable economic outcome for the region. How about you?
No, and I like the idea of creating jobs and creating easier access to get to and from a job, because that person, like I said, their money that they make gets spent in this greater economy. The farther up the food chain, it doesn't.
Absolutely. And again, for folks who might be on the underemployed category and they can't afford a car, to give them ways to get to work and to get to better jobs helps those folks pull themselves up. And I know manufacturers who are, struggling to find workers in North Minneapolis or in Rogers or in Eden Prairie and in Hopkins. If we can create transit corridors that make it easier, everybody wins on that deal.
Sure. So what, for folks like you, do you need done with regard to the Minnesota legislature? Who needs to have their phones ringing and their email boxes filling up, that kind of thing?
The legislature comes back to session, is it Monday morning or Tuesday morning next week? And I think anybody that is either takes transit or shares a road that uses transit. So if you live somewhere along 35W and a bus goes by you, the more people that are on that bus, the fewer cars are on your road. We all benefit when transit is more accessible and more available. So I can't think of anybody that shouldn't call their legislator this weekend, drop them an email. They all see that, and because they're on break right now, they're going to come back Monday and look at who laid into me, who has concerns, what are the issues that are still bothering people. We've got 5 or 6 weeks of session left before we adjourn in May. What are the things that need to get done? I'll argue that transportation funding is a big part of that, and the Southwest Lightrail is a significant piece for the metro region. But again, if you're outstate, I still think transit funding is a big deal. It has an impact on every one of us.
Yeah, well, you're seeing this argument pop up around the Midwest. I know in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they had a big funding budget for their I-94 corridor there that heads out from Milwaukee westbound, and some of those dollars got pulled back, and the governor was saying that, he wasn't going to fund parts of these renovation and reconstruction projects because of the pressure they're getting from outstate Wisconsin. And, it is a little short-sighted when you think about the bigger picture of, the whole machine working together, so to speak.
I don't know if you remember, we had a bridge fall not very long ago here. Again,
Sure.
Underfunding transit at a macro level just sort of baffles me. And I know that there's lots of demands for dollars, and
Okay.
a lot of people would like to see the taxes come back, but funding transit is critical to the society that we live in. You look at the people who say, I want to be in an autonomous car. We don't need to fund bridges anymore. Some other vehicle will drive me. Well, last time I checked on the train, there were 150 people and only one driver. 149 of them were in a self-driving vehicle.
Yep. Well, you can contact your legislator starting Monday, or do it this weekend. Look them up and send them an email, Southwest Light Rail Line. Very good. Thanks so much, Jim, for spending a little time with us.
Thanks, Moose. Appreciate your call.